Drupal, as you may know, is what classically called a web content management system. It's actually grown to be much more than that. It's actually much more of a web framework now for building almost any kind of web application that you want. It has a small core with 7,000 community-contributed modules that allow you to extend it to do almost anything you can imagine. But because of that, infinite flexibility, it's not always easy to figure out how you might build a community website. So we're going to talk about Drupal Commons and how you use it. Just to make sure, for those of you who don't know about Drupal, I'm going to give you just a bit of a background. Drupal as a project had 7 major releases. We just released Drupal 7 about a month and a half ago. And it means it's very mature. It's been built by people in over 200 countries around the globe, and people who had material contributions to it. There are over 700 people who contributed to just the core of Drupal, much less all those 7,000 community contributed modules. Over 700 people contributed to Drupal core in Drupal 7. There are, as I said, over 7,000 extensions that you can get for Drupal. There are close to 750,000 registered community members on Drupal.org, the site where everybody goes and registers if they're interested in the Drupal operation of the Drupal community. And we have a web crawler that crawls the web to try to find Drupal sites because we can fingerprint them. And we know there's at least 1 million Drupal websites out there, and there's probably more because that's only counting top-level domains. That's not counting subdomains like the 3-part dotted names. It's not counting intranets and things like that. So my guess is at least double that. So a couple of million websites. And frankly, if you look at the distribution of the complexity of the website and the kind of the Alexa rank of the website, Drupal tends to be in the more sophisticated and higher ranked websites because it's generally used by more enterprises as compared to some of the other CMS tools which are used by kind of very small businesses and that kind of thing. So it's very kind of enterprise focused. So it's a great phenomenon, and I hope you can take that for granted. Just as an example, some of the people that are our customers and Drupal users, the White House is a Drupal site and an Acquia customer. During the Egyptian uprising of a couple of months ago, Al Jazeera, who had all of their live blog sites and the live news sites hosted over there, were all of a sudden slammed. They came to us, and in 4 hours we moved them into our infrastructure and completely removed all bottlenecks for servicing all their content. NPR is building a massive intranet, a massive infrastructure so that all the small radio stations around the country who aren't the big stuff in Chicago and Washington and Boston can come and get a very, very nicely canned and very easy to use website based on Drupal. Just go down the list. A World Economic Forum is a Drupal Commons site. They use it to run the Davos meeting in Switzerland every year. And that kind of thing. So big adoption of Drupal. And the reason that people adopt it, frankly, is because it's really powered by the community. It can go so much faster as a project and as a technology base than any given proprietary vendor. When you have a community of 10,000 developers, 7,000 doing core, doing contrib modules, and a few hundred doing core and all that kind of stuff, it's amazing how fast the technology will advance. In particular, the thing that's interesting for social sites is that most social sites need these social things. They need profiles and blogging and microblogging and user-generated content and groups and tagging and all that kind of stuff. But almost all the examples that I showed you in that first list of slides also had a material component of regular old website content. It wasn't all social all the time. All of those sites had some kind of corporate communications they needed to do as well. And that's the reason that Drupal works so well as a social publishing platform or as a social business platform, because it can do both. It has all those elements together in one package. So I mentioned that Drupal kind of has this core and lots of modules. And all the sites that I showed you, actually, had to be built kind of like this. They had to kind of go get core, which is maybe the chassis of the car, and then go hunt through the 7,000 modules to figure out which ones were going to be relevant and stick them in the core and try to build the car. And while that's fun for developers, it's not always interesting for the people who just need the social site to work. And what was really needed, we think, was to have something that says this is core plus the kind of set of modules that you need in order to build a social site. Now you still want to customize it, and in the car metaphor you may want to have either automatic transmission or manual, and what kind of wheels do you want, what color, and those kinds of things. But you still don't want to have to build the whole thing from scratch. And so that's what Drupal Commons is. Drupal Commons is Drupal core plus a bunch of pre-selected modules, a color scheme, a set of content types, and all these kinds of things that are predefined for you by Acquia that allows you to be able to take that whole thing right off the shelf and go to work right away on your community site. It really bundles its functions into 4 major areas. 1 is content and collaboration. 2 is people and the relationship between them and how do you make that interesting. 3 is how do you allow people to personalize their user interface. And then 4 is how do you as a business or as an organization understand whether or not your community site is working the way you need to. So let's take a look at each of those. I do have a demo at the end. It's a recorded demo because I never know how good the wireless is going to be in a conference, so I can do that. And if I get finished in time, then I'll try to run that recorded demo for you. And if I don't get time, then you can stay afterwards and watch it if you'd like, something like that out in the hall. First of all, content. Since Drupal Commons is built on Drupal, which is a content management system, of course you can imagine we're going to have all kinds of support for great content stuff. So for example, we have a bunch of preset content types like blogs and discussions and wiki pages and all that kind of stuff. But of course, since it's Drupal, if you want to define new content types like rides, if you're a bike ride company or if you're a bike shop or something like that, you can define new content types and have views of them that show all the rides of a particular type. We have both self-organized groups or kind of managed groups, depending on how you want to set your group stuff up. And we have these concepts called groups where people come in and join a topical group and see the activity that's going on inside of those groups. We have predefined content views. For example, I want to see all the blogs, or I want to see all the events in this particular group, or something like that. So some predefined things for you. And predefined, we also allow you to either predefine your own set of kind of category tags, or allow the community to free tag things, just like they do on Dig, one of those kind of guys, where you just tag kind of stuff. Sorry, I had a brain fade there. Worked out just before this, and so I'm still recovering from the workout. Excuses. Also, we have a thing called the Acquia Network, and the Acquia Network provides you with a set of value-added services that go beyond what's built into Drupal. We supply those from the cloud, if you want to call it that. And one of the things we can give you in the network is, for example, something like faceted search. Who here has used Kayak to look at airplane reservations or something like that? You know how you have all the filters on the side saying by date or by time or price range and that kind of stuff? That's called faceted search. So you can change the filter criteria on your search by little blocks in the sidebar. We can do that kind of stuff for your site. We can also do things like automated content recommendations and spell check corrections and things like that. So give you those kinds of things for content. For people and relationships, since people are part of of a community site, we have predefined things like profiles with profile pictures and who you are and where you live and what your interests are and all that kind of stuff that allows you to do Facebook-y kind of things so that people can know a little bit about you and look at some pictures of you and things like that. It'll allow you to connect with friends by saying, I want to friend this person. When you friend them, you start to see their activity the way you do in Facebook or Twitter or something like that. Same thing I said with activity streams. We have these little microblogging things that we call Shoutbox, which is kind of a built-in Twitter-style thing where you can have little interactions with people without actually having to start a discussion thread that might go on for a page and a half, something like that. And because Drupal Commons is based on Drupal, it has a very sophisticated system for creating named roles that have various kinds of permissions to do things on the site. And then you can say, well, I want a role for somebody who's like a content approver and then set up a workflow for that if you really want to have a restrictive community. By the way, I don't recommend that. People want to see their stuff right away. And if they don't see their content coming up right away, they tend to go away and not come back. But you can define that if you want to in your organization. So we have the ability to have roles and permissions. The third category is kind of personalization, the things that I was talking about that Drupal Commons does. And in personalization, everybody gets their own dashboard. Everybody that has a user account gets their own dashboard, which allows them to say, what kind of blocks do I want on a page that helps me consume the information I care about when I come back to this community site? So I can see recent content by my friends, or see the unread content that I have from all the groups that I belong to, or a listing of the groups I belong to, or a listing of my friends that are there online right now, or those kinds of things. And you can drag and drop that stuff around, arrange the page you want, put what blocks you want to the page where, and save it so that when you come back, that's available for you. You can also do things like bookmark content. We have things like curated content where the community manager can say, this content is pretty cool. I want to feature it. And there's a little checkbox that they'll be able to see as a community manager that says feature this content. And that featured content block can then show up on people's dashboard pages or in group home pages or things like that. And then people can, of course, as I said, subscribe to content and discussions. They get email notifications of new content in a group or of follow-up comments to either a posting you made or to a comment that you made, something like that. And finally, if you have a site, one of the things you want to know is how well is it doing? And we actually recommend that you use some of the best tools that are out there for looking at overall website analytics. Use Google Analytics. Use Web Trends or whatever you have to show you the actual what pages are most visited and things like that. Because you want to look at entrance and exit paths, and you want to look at browser types and all those kinds of things that are interesting if you have an externally facing community. Internally that might be less interesting, but certainly on an externally facing community. So use those tools. But there are things those tools can't tell you that you should be looking for in one of your social business software applications, like how many new users over a period of time, how much new content was created, how many comments were created, and those kinds of things. And those commercial tools, the web analytics tools, can't tell you that because they don't know when new content's created. Drupal Commons or whatever package you use does. So your package of choice should give you some way to say, give me all that kind of information over certain selected date ranges and let me decide, how my community is doing. Is it healthy? Is it vibrant? Is it growing? Are people active? And that kind of thing. So the big question is, there are great companies out there building interesting proprietary tools for all this stuff, and how does open source stack up? So the most popular one in this particular genre is called Jive software. Who's heard of Jive? Good, not very many of you. I'm happy about that. The most popular one is Jive in the commercial space, and I just kind of wanted to go down the list of all the things that we think they do and compare how open source stacks up. And remember that all those sites I showed you in the beginning, the screenshots of the various sites, though they weren't using Drupal Commons, what they were using is Drupal with all these plugin modules. And all Drupal Commons does is assemble into a single ready-to-use package all those things that people have been using all along. So all those sites were built using the same things that are in Drupal Commons. All we did was prepackage it. What that means for you is that there's a long history in the Drupal world of using Drupal to build community sites. In fact, for most of the lifetime of Drupal, its kind of tagline underneath it has been Drupal, community plumbing, because it's been primarily used to build communities. In fact, its original use was as a college bulletin board system. The co-founder of Acquia with me and a guy named Dries Petert, who's the project lead of Drupal, he built it as he was a freshman in college in Ghent, Belgium, for he and his buddies to figure out where they're going to go out partying on any given weekend night. And so it started off as a community project, and it just kept going as kind of a community-oriented platform. So as you might expect, it fares very well in comparison, just because there's so much history in the Drupal world of using it for community platforms. So whether it's having kind of regular modern Web 2.0 content types, or having groups and hierarchies of groups, or even giving you WYSIWYG content creation, things like that, it goes down the list, and every one of those, Drupal fares very well. And in fact, even better than the proprietary. In this case, social software, you'll find that in fact, the open source stuff is not just the equivalent to, but probably better than the proprietary software. It just hasn't been assembled before, and now that it's assembled, it's easy for you to approach. So to give you a couple of examples, in the comment spam filtering, go to Jive Software and go to their own corporate forums under Jive Software for their own community. It is littered with comment spam. All kinds of people from all over the globe putting link backs to their thing where they're trying to get SEO out